Finally got you guys on, man. I'm excited for this one, man. This is going to be a good one. I expect you guys to bring some strong arguments to the table. They bring these guys in. I don't want to keep these guys waiting too much longer. How you guys doing, man? How's everything?
Doing
good,
well.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining me this episode, man. I'm excited for this one, man. What's up, Eric, man? How Texas treating you, buddy?
Good. It's doing good. Texas is always good. It's God's country.
There it is in Lone Star State. What you got going on your side, Robert, man? How things on where you at, man?
I'm also from Texas, so
okay, there it is.
I'm also in allegedly God's country.
Amen.
All right, cool, man.
I may not be welcome there.
All right,
you
guys.
are.
Before we jump into this debate, man, I'm gonna give you guys a chance to introduce yourself to the audience. Somebody out there don't know who you are, man. So start with Mr. Robert, man. Go over a quick introduction of yourself, man.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. I watch your show constantly, Marlon. So I'm really excited to be part of this and talking to Eric. He's been on my podcast before, The Right to Reason. You can find it at therighttoreason.com. I'm on YouTube, just like Marlon and Eric. The podcast discusses philosophy, religion, psychology. When I'm not doing that, I work in pharma. I'm a quality engineer. I have a bachelor's in political science, currently working on my master's in criminal justice. I've been married to my wife, Gregoria, for 14 years. I'm a father of 2 teenagers, 1 boy, 1 girl. And we all live in Central Texas with 2 dogs. So that's about me.
All right. Thank you, Robert, once again for joining me. All right, Eric, give a quick introduction to yourself, man.
Yeah, name's Eric Hernandez. Like you said, I am the apologetics lead for the Baptist General Convention of Texas. Encompasses doing conferences in apologetics, and check out, shameless plug, YouTube channel, just youtube.com/Eric Hernandez. Wife and 2 beautiful children. God is good, 3 dogs. And yeah, looking forward to this.
All right, guys, man, it's an exciting one, man. We're going to have a great discussion, a great debate. So once again, the topic of today's debate is God necessary for morality. Eric, you're arguing the affirmative in this debate. Robert, you're arguing the negative in this debate. So we're going to start off 15-minute opening statements. Then we're going to follow that with, I believe we had a 40-minute cross-examination. I believe 40 minutes. Then the first 20 minutes would be more of a, it'd be 10 minutes each to ask questions. Or was it? I don't know. I forget the format there. I believe it's 20 minutes each to ask questions, and then that's going to be followed by more of a 20-minute open discussion between you guys, where you guys to hash out those lingering questions. That's going to be followed up with a 5-minute closing, and then we got some Q&A from the audience. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Eric, I know you have some slides to share, so you can go ahead and share those slides.
All right, let me get set up real quick. Okay. All right, okay. You ready?
All right, I'm ready. You got it for 15 minutes.
All right, so again, just thanks to both of you for being here. So let's jump right in. Tonight's question is God necessary for morality? Now, by this we mean objective morality, which both Rob and I hold to. And it would be important to start by giving a definition. So objective morality can be defined as something that is universally binding and independent of human thought or opinion. And to answer tonight's question, we would need to first note some key features of objective morality that any system would have to account for on their worldview. So we could say that objective morality, that it is supremely authoritative, which means it is an overriding guide to conduct, attitudes, and motives. So it's more than just a consideration of etiquette, custom, or law. It is prescriptive, which means it prescribes moral duties, not merely describes what people feel or do. And it is universalizable, which means that it applies equally to all relevantly similar situations. Now, any worldview which seeks to provide a basis for objective morality is also going to have to provide an answer to the question, why should I adopt the moral point of view? And in answering this question, it's important to make the distinction between motives and reasons. That is to say, motivational preferences versus rational reasons. So when we look at something like motivational preferences, this would be something like people will like me. I adopt the moral point of view because people like me. Contrast that with rational reasons. Now, when it comes to rational reasons, they're going to be non-moral justifications, which means they cannot be a moral reason to the answer of this question. To elaborate on why, Let's distinguish between a moral should and a rational should. Now, why not a moral should in answer to the question? Well, because this would be essentially asking for moral reasons for accepting moral reasons. In other words, if you said you should adopt the moral point of view because harming people is morally wrong, then you're essentially saying that you shouldn't be moral because it is immoral, which is circular. So moral answers for adopting the moral point of view won't cut it. Now, when it comes to a rational should, this would be an answer that comes from outside the moral point of view. This is going to have to be something that alludes to and is grounded in the way in which we were built to function and flourish properly, which shows us that we now also know that objective morality is going to be a rational enterprise, and it is teleological by nature, which means that the key features of objective morality we can now say are rational, teleological, supremely authoritative, prescriptive, and universalizable. Now, because of these key features regarding objective morality, it would follow that any worldview which seeks to account for the existence of objective morality would have to ground them in something that is a rational source. So that would mean something sentient, because non-sentient objects can't be rational. It would have to be a necessary source, because objective morality is universal, prescriptive, and authoritative. It would have to be an eternal source, because much like objective truth, objective morality is discovered, not invented. So it does not begin to exist. Kind of like 2 + 2 = 4 is something we discovered. We didn't invent. Neither did this begin to be true at a certain point in time. It would have to be a personal source, because moral values are intrinsic to persons, not things. So things like loyalty, love, kindness are properties of persons and not objects. Moreover, because of the notion of a moral duty, a duty is something that is owed, an obligation. This notion arises from a command or order, which would imply some type of moral lawgiver. And this grounding would have to be transcendent. Why? Well, because nature and its laws are contingent, non-eternal, non-personal, non-necessary, non-sentient things, and thus would fail to account for the key features of objective morality. So this means that the grounding for the source of objective morality, whatever it is going to have to be in something that is rational, necessary, eternal, personal, and transcendent. And of course, any worldview which seeks to answer tonight's question must also assume that human beings can have moral knowledge, the rationality, moral responsibility, sentience, i.e. consciousness, and libertarian free will. And of course, I'm going to argue that none of these things can be accounted for on a naturalistic framework. Of course, it wouldn't be a debate without Eric Hernandez if I didn't touch on the soul. So in answer to tonight's topic, is God necessary for morality? I want to use what we've established so far to show why God is in fact in every way necessary for morality, as opposed to a no-God account or worldview, something like atheism or naturalism. So with this in mind, I have 2 basic arguments. The first argument is the moral argument, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I modified it by Dr. Craig, which says that if God does not exist, then objective moral values, duties, and knowledge cannot exist. Objective moral values, duties, and knowledge do exist, therefore God exists. Now, we know that the grounding of objective morality must be in something eternal, necessary, transcendent, and personal. This would automatically rule out human beings. Why? Because while we are personal and rational sometimes, we are not eternal, necessary, or transcendent. This would also rule out grounding objective morality in something like the natural law, like gravity, math, or logic. This is because neither are sentient, thus not rational, much less personal. Moreover, something like math or logic, while it may be transcendent, eternal, and necessary, it is not personal. So things like fairness, kindness, love, again, are properties of persons, not things. So the grounding cannot be in some abstraction, but must be in something personal, sentient, and rational. So it would have to be grounded, of course, in a rational, necessary, eternal, personal, transcendent source. Now, hence, this would have to be grounded in something like God. Now, this alludes back to the first premise that if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties and knowledge cannot exist. Now, concerning the knowledge aspect, this refers to what I mentioned earlier about the prerequisites for even answering the question. This is the assumption of moral knowledge. Now, anyone who's heard me debate before knows I use a version of the evolutionary argument against naturalism, argument from reason. But to basically sum this up in brief, it basically asserts that if there is no God, then our cognitive faculties have evolved for survival value and not truth value. Given that this is the case, we would now have an undercutting defeater, which would remove any justification for the truth of our beliefs. Moreover, if knowledge at minimum requires a justified true belief, well, then I would argue that if there is no God, then you cannot have a justified true belief given the undercutting defeater. So it would follow that if there can be no justified true belief or rationale behind it, then it would also imply that moral knowledge, much less moral knowledge, would be impossible. Moreover, I would argue that if consciousness exists, it is immaterial, and if such, would have to be grounded in an immaterial substance like a soul. But again, if there is no God, then there can be nothing like a soul, and thus consciousness would not exist. And if you give these things up, if there is no God, I would also argue there can be no free will, and if there's no free will, I would say there can be no moral responsibility, no rational responsibility, and no intellectual integrity. So not only does a naturalistic no-God framework fail to account for a rational, necessary, eternal, personal, transcendent grounding of morality, but it utterly removes the very possibility of knowledge and rationality in the first place, and thus utterly fails and cannot account for moral knowledge as well. So even the very prerequisites for even answering the question would be impossible. Now, my second argument would be the argument from the existence of evil. Given that both Rob and I affirm objective morality, it can be said that we both affirm objective evil as well, and we can just add a premise to the previous argument to simplify this. Now, in order for evil to exist, however, there are at least two assumptions that we must make. The first is that there exists an objective moral standard. So, to explain this, much like a lie can only exist if truth exists, so too evil can exist if and only if an objective standard of goodness exists. A lie is a deviation of truth, so too evil is a deviation of good. A lie is a privation of truth, and so too evil is a privation of the good. Now, the problem here is that we've already established in the previous argument that an objective standard of good can only exist if God exists. Hence, if evil exists, then it is a privation and deviation from an objective standard of good. And if an objective standard of good exists, then God exists, i.e. a rational, necessary, eternal, personal, transcendent being. Therefore, if evil exists, then a standard of goodness exists, and if a standard of goodness exists, then God must exist. Hence, if God does not exist, then there can be no objective standard, and if there's no standard, then evil cannot exist. But once again, if evil does exist, then it follows that God must exist necessarily. Now, the second assumption for the existence of evil is teleology to life in the natural world. Teleology is a notion of a final cause, an objective purpose or goal to things. To understand this, it would be important to understand the difference between an efficient cause and a final cause. An efficient cause is that by means of which an effect is produced, whereas a final cause is that for the sake of which something is brought about. It is the reason for which i.e. is the goal or purpose to something. Now, I would argue that if there is no God, there are no final causes, there are only efficient causes. In other words, if there is no God, then we can't say that we are evolving for the sake of goal. So to explain our existence, we cannot appeal to final causes, only efficient causes. Our existence cannot be explained or derived from an objective final cause or teleological standard as if we exist for some objective goal or purpose, but rather can and must be explained purely in terms of efficient causes. Hence, if there is no God, then there is no teleology to life in the natural world by default. Now, this also shows us that teleology also implies that there is a way things ought to be, which alludes to something like a proper functioning and or flourishing. So to illustrate, suppose I were to say that I have a bad phone. Now, this would assume teleology in a few ways. First, a bad phone implies that there is a dysfunction, and a dysfunction would imply that it is a deviation from a proper function, which would mean that there is something my phone ought to do, but it's not, which entails that there is an objective goal and purpose and a final cause for which my phone was made. Now, two further implications would follow from this, namely that there is a design plan that all these notions of teleology are in line and accordance with, which would imply, of course, a designer. Now, with respect to the phone, this would be something like Apple or Microsoft or Samsung and so forth. Now, when we relate this to morality, if bad phones are a lot like evil in the natural world, then we're going to be assuming some of the same things like proper functions, oughts, and final causes. So let's apply this to life in the natural world. If we look at, let's say, a child being born colorblind or with a disease by definition is a disorder of structure or function. So a disease implies a dysfunction, which would imply proper function, which would imply that there is an ought to how the body should be acting, which is what gives rise to the proper function, and would imply an objective goal and an objective purpose, which is where the goal stems from, and it would imply a final cause, which is all teleology to life in the natural world. But again, if this is a case, then it infers some type of design plan, which would infer a designer, and hence something like God. And I would argue, of course, that God would be necessary for this in the first place. So we can simplify it by saying if a disease is evil, which implies dysfunction, and such things imply teleology, which give the properties of teleology, then it would follow that God must exist and is a reason for which there can be teleology to life in the first place. But if there is no God, then there can be no teleology along with its features, and thus evil could not exist in this way. So the existence of evil presupposes God in that it assumes, one, a lack of objective good, and objectivity can only exist if there is a rational, necessary, eternal, personal, transcendent grounding, namely God, and a deviation of teleology, which implies that something is not functioning and flourishing in the way it ought to in accordance with his design plan, which means there must be a designer. Hence, we can say if evil exists, we can deduce that God must exist necessarily. So, in summation, we can say that the necessary key features of objective morality are going to allude us to what kind of necessary grounding source we would need for morality, and this also alludes us to the necessary prerequisites for even answering the question in the first place. And we can say when taken together, we can now see the cumulative case as to why indeed, if objective morality exists, and if we can know that objective morality exists, along with the freedom, responsibility, and rationale behind it, then it must follow that yes, God exists and is in fact necessary for morality. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for that opening statement. All right, Robert, you're up for your 15-minute opening statement. Let me know when you're ready, and then I'll start the time.
Ready to rock, brother.
All right. You got it. 15 minutes.
I will be arguing that we don't need a God for our morals. Many evangelical apologists like my friend Eric here will try to present moral decision-making as something that occurs supernaturally in the spirit. The benefit of this thinking is that it allows them to justify an apparently inconsistent moral judge, aka their God. If a biblical story doesn't make sense, like when God mentally forced Pharaoh to keep the Jewish slaves and then punished him and the rest of Egypt for it, or when they can't answer the tough questions like, what age do you get to decide to accept Jesus? Or does some guy in Botswana that never heard the gospel still go to hell? The soul conveniently offers the believer the chance to say, God knows the heart. The soul also means that after death, we get to continue with our current state of consciousness for all of eternity in paradise with our lost loved ones. We cannot be too judgmental of anyone not wanting to give that up for science or intellectual honesty. I would like to offer you a much more mature way of thinking about morality. Consider that it does not exist in some spiritual or mysterious ether. What if our understanding of morality has been passed on through the course of evolution because it helps us to live in large social groups by enhancing our ability to get along and interact with others? Building blocks of morality such as sensing fairness, experiencing empathy, and judging others' harmful or helpful actions can be observed in infancy before a child's social environment would be able to have a strong influence. Specific parts of the human brain are involved in moral reasoning, both the kind that happens very quickly and the kind that's thought out. So we're not just talking about instinct. Eric will argue that we make decisions in our soul, but neuroscience teaches us that damage to certain parts of the brain dramatically alter moral judgments and behavior. If doctors slice through your corpus callosum, the bundle of neural fibers connecting the two sides of your neocortex, responsible for language, conscious thought, and movement, then you'll seemingly be of two minds. Yes, two different people. This procedure, known as corpus callostomy, first occurred in 1979 and is still commonly performed throughout the world today. There was even an example where one side of the brain was an atheist and the other was a theist. So who goes to heaven in that scenario with Eric's worldview? Did God create an extra soul mid-surgery, perhaps? Sounds crazy when faced against science. Neuroscience studies people with brain lesions and examines how moral behaviors change after an injury. They use MRI scanners and EEG to image the brain as subjects make moral decisions. And they adjust the patient's decision-making abilities by increasing or lowering the production of chemicals known as neural modulators, such as oxytocin, where we get our generosity, envy, bias, what have you, or serotonin, that's your social behaviors, aggression. They have discovered that what we may call empathy is actually a result of mirror neurons that cause us to feel psychological suffering when we see another person being hurt. We now know that even our political leanings, this one's going to blow your mind, our political leanings are largely the result of the size of your amygdala. Conservatives have really big amygdala, there's two of them, and liberals have little itty-bitty ones, so make whatever joke you want there about liberals, but it's science. Morals don't come from some spiritual source. They don't even come from one place in your brain. There's no moral center. For example, I'm going to struggle through these, Eric, you might have to help me out. The medial prefrontal cortex plays an important role in interpreting the understandings and thoughts of mental states of ourselves and others. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a critical hub for caregiving behaviors, morality, and decision-making, combines our cognitive and emotional processes necessary to guide social behavior. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex plays an important role in self-control and intelligence. Insula provides the foundation for being aware of how our body feels. The posterior superior temporal sulcus is the key region to understand the intention of others. So when you remember, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you can't do that without insula and the posterior superior temporal sulcus. Can't be done. If morals were found only in a soul, then why would we see apparent moral actions in other animals, which I think we would agree don't have souls? You don't get to take your dog to heaven, although we would like to. The same empathy that we hold in high regard as an evolved primate, we see in other species. Ask yourself if the following acts are good: helping care for offspring, assisting with collecting food, providing affection when another member of the species is in distress, sharing, forming alliances for mutual benefit, responding negatively to other members being treated unfairly, finally grooming, hugging, and even kissing sick or injured members of a social group. These are all acts we witness with everything from capuchin monkeys and chimps to canines and rodents, even rodents. We're not as divine as we would like to regard ourselves. Obviously, other species are not as morally advanced as we are, but these correlations clearly show that our subjective understanding of objective morality has developed via evolution and was not created in an ethereal soul factory. Do we need God for morality? Let's be clear in this debate. We're not talking about whether or not someone needs to be a theist in order to be moral. I'm sure Eric would agree with me that non-believers can act morally. This debate asks, could we have morality without God? I would first say that we are discussing right or wrong behavior committed by conscious beings to conscious beings. If you're not talking about human flourishing or avoiding suffering, then you need to use another word, because that's what everyone means whenever we're talking about something being bad. If you cut someone off in traffic and that person doesn't need to invoke some kind of moral lawgiver or something from divinity to know that you're being a jerk. So let's pick something that we would all agree is immoral, such as rape, for example. Even though Eric's Bible in Deuteronomy 22 takes a very different perspective on rape than we do, is it wrong to rape? Well, we can explore the multiple levels of morality in addressing this question and see if we find God in any of them. Evolution and the animal kingdom seem to endorse rape. However, primates have developed systems to avoid cuckoldry so that one's resources are not going to go to a different gene pool, for example. Do we need God to explain this? No, I don't think we do. You could argue, well, he made everything, so we got to, okay, that's a different topic altogether. We don't need God to explain avoidance of cuckoldry in primates. We later evolved, and this concept turned into law, where women were considered property, and that her virginity could be stolen from her, like the aforementioned Deuteronomy did. Do we find God here? Certainly not needed. Eventually, we matured sociologically to recognize the rights of women and their bodily autonomy. Is God necessary for that? No, he's not. Let's explore this from another perspective, subjective morality. Do we each individually think rape is wrong? Yes, some may disagree, but I would assume the viewers of the Gospel Truth would say it's wrong. Classy bunch, minus a few. I don't know. We can see that it harms another human being, and we know that we do not want to be harmed ourselves. Didn't need God for that. Let's consider if we find rape wrong objectively. For the most part, the majority of the world has, as a group, objectively agreed it's wrong, with or without God. That is one understanding of objective, not based on a single person's opinion, but of, all of our opinions together. What if we consider objectivity in the sense of, even if the entire world believed it was right to rape, is it still wrong? Not just beyond the individual, but is it wrong beyond all the individuals? I think to understand this, we could use Rawls' veil of ignorance, which I'm happy to comment on further. I encourage you to look that up if you're not familiar with it. Or simply recognize, this one's even easier than Rawls, simply recognize that there is a truth about human flourishing and the avoidance of unnecessary suffering that exists with or without our awareness of it, just as 2 + 2 = 4, before we evolved to understand that fact. Rape was violating the victim's rights even before we learned that truth, like in the Old Testament days. It is objectively wrong. And we're done. There was no God necessary to answer any of these questions. Now, Eric may wish to proceed further and say, yeah, but is it wrong in some ultimate cosmic supernatural sense? I can't find the need to invoke the supernatural here. It seems to me that this is simply theist apologetics and not engaging in ethics and morality. It's similar to asking if morality exists in the Star Wars universe. I don't care. It's not real. And we didn't need it to make our moral decisions. Even if we had it as a resource, we would still have to use our own morality to determine if it is right or wrong. I sent Mr. Wilson some recommended references, and perhaps he'll be kind enough to post or show. You can reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter or through the YouTube resource if you want them. That's where I got a lot of my information, if you find any of it sounding a little wacky, but I'll end my point with this. Mr. Hernandez is asking you to base your moral system off of the past. He disagrees with modern evolutionary science and neurology and myopically chooses to focus his ethical understanding on only cultural morality, specifically the morals of the Holy Bible. That is not philosophy, that is theology. The Bible has some great stuff in it. I'll be honest. I'll be the first atheist to say it if I have to. But this is more or less anthropology, or has some value anthropologically. Let's take a quick look at this moral guide and see if we should follow it today. Exodus 21 tells us how to obtain a slave, rules for sex slavery, how much we can beat a slave, how to use a slave's love for his family as a way to keep him a slave. Deuteronomy 25 tells us to cut off a woman's hand if she grabs a man by the balls while he's fighting. A couple chapters before that, it says, men with their penises cut off can't be in the congregation of the Lord. Keeping with this theme, Genesis 38 tells us the story of when God told Onan to have sex with his brother's wife, and then God slew him for spilling his seed on the ground. Even Jesus struggled with morality. Jesus himself. He says in Matthew 5 that checking out a girl is just as bad as adultery. We know that's not true. That's ridiculous. That's just a few examples. And leaving out the obvious ones, such as creating hell and then sending people there. Let's not forget about the flood. He flooded the world, everyone, babies, kittens, puppies. It's a pretty ridiculous source of morality, written during a time before concepts of non-racist civil rights, democracy, democratic peace theory, and even the toothbrush. It's completely natural to respect the past in classical writings, but Eric is afraid to give up his afterlife fantasy. And he is asking you to anchor yourself in an antiquated moral system. I recommend a secular moral system that is capable of evolving and changing as we learn more about the natural world and one another. That is, in fact, how we developed our country's legal system. We didn't say you have to believe in this religion or that. Our founders recognized that different religions will always disagree, and that not even the members of a single faith can agree with one another. Marlon and Eric, love both you guys, cool dudes, but Marlon and Eric, both Christians, but they don't even agree with each other about how Christian salvation works. Seems important to me. But that's okay, because morals only become more complicated when you suffocate them with old ideologies and bigotry. Even Eric's book tells us, by Eric's book, I mean the Bible. He's got a book coming out soon. He's working on it. The Bible tells us, via the Apostle Paul, when I was a child, I spake as a child, understood as a child, thought as a child. I became a man. That's when I put away those childish things. By saying, God said it, I believe it. Eric tries to take a shortcut with ethics and ultimately holds us back from answering the tough questions. The answer may have been fine in humanity's infancy, but we've grown out of it, and if we are going to continue to grow, our understanding of morality will have to mature as well. If Eric claims God is necessary for morality and then says morality is doing what God wants, he's making a circular argument, and there's no reason for any debate there. At the end of the day, I think things aren't as simple and therefore confusing as Eric would have you believe. Morality means doing that which is in our best interest, that we should be kind to one another no matter our differences. That's all I have, Marlon.
All right, thank you guys for those opening statements. Eric, you there?
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yeah, your screen is blacked out.
Let me hold on.
I was so excited, I thought my opening argument made him leave. I was like, I won. I did it. All right. It's going to be harder than that, huh?
Yeah, so I got some, I think I got the cross out. I said 20 minutes each to ask questions. It's actually 10 minutes each to ask questions, the first 20 minutes. And then follow that with a 20-minute open discussion where you guys will be able to hash out those lingering issues. Yeah, I still see them. There you go. But I think you have to adjust your, switch your camera. There you go. There you go.
His opening didn't make me run because I didn't hear an argument.
Oh. I was so excited for a moment.
All right, guys, we're cross-examination now, man. So once again, this is 40 minutes total. The first 20 minutes will be 10 minutes each to ask questions, and then we'll follow that with more of a 20-minute open discussion. So, audience, I don't see any questions. A lot of questions anyway popping up. Let's get those questions in because these guys are ready to tackle them after their closing statements. That said, Eric, you're up for your 10-minute cross-examination of Robert.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I heard some ad hominems in psychoanalyzing, such as me not wanting to give up a fear in an afterlife, and that I am telling people to ground morality in something in the past or the Bible. None of those were in my opening. Now, granted, you didn't know my opening, so I'll let you slide there because I like you. I guess my first question, to be quite frank, it would have to be where was the argument that God is not necessary for morality?
I think I revealed that we could look at each stage of our moral progression as humans, and that at each of them he wasn't needed to decide that rape was wrong. Rape just being one example. We could use others, maybe something more simple, or if you want to go more complex, I don't know why. But well,
here's the issue with that kind of response is that so I'm assuming you're familiar with the distinction between moral epistemology and moral ontology, correct?
Whether or not it's true and where did it come from? Is that what you mean?
No. So you have moral epistemology, moral knowledge, and then you have the existence of morality itself. It seems that your entire case was predicated on the fact, it sounds like it can be summed up by saying, I don't need to believe in God to know right from wrong. But that's not my argument, nor is that any version of any moral argument that I know of. The argument is that without God, there can be no morality in the first place. Now, you appeal to things that where you would allegedly say we can know morality without belief in God. But again, it wasn't my argument. At best, evolution can make you believe that rape is wrong. And of course, you don't believe in free will, but it doesn't make rape wrong in the first place. So I'm not asking how we come to believe in morality. The question for tonight is whether or not God is necessary for the existence of morality. And I didn't hear an argument addressing that. Did you have one?
Understanding the existence of morality, would that not be something that we would then access, we would perceive, being that you and I are both not moral relativists? So approaching it from any other direction than how do we discover morality, I don't know that there would be any use in that.
No, so it's kind of like saying, I don't need to believe in authors to read a book. And you can even say, I can even read books better than you do, and I don't believe in authors. But the question is not whether or not we can read without knowing authors. The question is, why is there a book in the first place? That would be akin to the question of whether or not God is necessary for morality. Let me ask, so evolution...
Okay.
Go ahead. Sure.
Well, if I were to answer that question, why is there morality in the first place? I would look at morality in the same way that we look at other truths. I think there are moral truths, empirical truths, logical absolutes.
But if you're trying to explain why, right, and we're asking why these things are facts. If there's no God, where would you ground this in? And I gave the key features and what's necessary to ground morality. Where would you ground the existence, not the knowledge, but the existence of it?
I don't know where everything came from. If that's the crux of it. In the same way, I don't know where morals came from, or laws of logic, or the books on my bookshelf, the matter that created them, what have you, life, pre-Big Bang. If we're going that far, am I straw manning your argument with that? Because I feel like you're saying, like, what? How would it come about? And I suppose that
No, I suppose I just have to refer back to my opening, where there are features of morality that allude us to what is needed to ground morality. Not to know it, but to ground it. So you would have to ground these things without God. You would have to ground this somehow. Going back to try and put this in a form of a question, given your view of naturalistic evolution, you were evolved to believe rape is wrong. But what makes rape objectively wrong? And no? Okay.
But my body interrupted. I didn't interrupt, but yeah, I'll stop you there. If convenient for the discussion. Simply something being evolutionarily motivating us one way or another. That's not how we've developed our morality. Those things might have helped us. So if I see a big round eyes wide apart with a big forehead, I see that as cute, right? And evolutionarily, we would say that that's how infants look. That might be how a puppy dog looks, right? That helps us in our empathy, but that doesn't necessarily define morality. Morality exists in many ways. I think I represented those. Some might be subjective. Some might be objective in the sense that we as a community agree it's not based on one member of the community. And there's another objective morality after that. And that's the one that I think we're talking about, or at least the one I'm talking about. And you're kind of dipping your toe into that water a little bit, where we would say it exists beyond us. But I think you're going for something even beyond that, which I don't know that it's needed. And that might be the source of our trouble, because it might be a little bit more semantics, where you're combining these last two items together. And I don't know that
let me jump in, and because you said something like, if you were going to answer the question about the existence of morality, you said I would look at morality alike. But if we're trying to answer whether or not morality exists, you cannot already presuppose there is morality in order to answer the question of morality. So we can touch on what you just said. So it seems, or tell me if I heard you correctly, are you conceding that morality is something that is transcendent to us?
I hate that word, Eric. Transcendent in the sense that it is beyond us. Beyond's also a little vague, but grain of salt.
Well, explain that. What do you mean by beyond us?
As long as that, even if everybody in the world, I think you referenced Hitler a little. Hitler was coming. It's inevitable. But anyway, so everybody, didn't you? No, I didn't. I was talking about rape. If we raped Hitler, no, that's not where I went. But okay, but if everybody, they won World War II and we're all Nazis today, would the Holocaust and some kind of reality where Nazis are running the world be objectively good? It would be objectively moral in the sense of everybody agrees with it, more or less. But it wouldn't be objectively moral in the fact that it's not aiding in humanity's flourishing. It's not aiding in
and why
lowering
are those
suffering.
Things good? Why are those things good?
Because that's what we're talking about when we're discussing morality. If what you are
Right.
talking about is something other than that which we would say would aid in human flourishing or would limit suffering or would be best for
No.
mankind,
No,
I
no,
I don't know. Like
agree. I think
we're having a Bible debate.
no. You're the one that's brought up the Bible. I haven't brought it up once. So, we agree for the most part on what things are moral and immoral. But I'm asking, kind of going. Say an alien race came and abducted us, raped us, probed us, used us as just farm equipment or whatever. What would be your protest to them as to why they shouldn't be doing these things?
I would say that you are treating us in a way that is unfair. It is immoral. It is violating our personal autonomy. It is.
And why would they
violating
care?
our rights?
Why would that matter?
They may not. In the same way, if I go and kick my dog, I might not feel bad about it at all. But
So
there is a truth that exists that says that dog was harmed unnecessarily. Not like I took the dog to the vet and it fixed its tooth. It was harmed unnecessarily. That's a fact.
yeah, but it sounds like what I alluded to. It sounds like you're saying we shouldn't be immoral because it's immoral, which is just circular.
No, I'm saying because there is a truth that we are trying to access, right? There is a fact about whether or not this is good for people or not. We might still be missing it. We're probably missing it in many ways today.
But you're still presupposing that human flourishing is good, so we should do this good because it's good.
Okay. So no. Whenever I'm discussing morality, that's what I mean by it.
Sure,
And it's your
fine.
question time, and I can save this for my question time if you want. But I would be curious, what do you mean by it? If you don't mean that, what are you talking about?
But again, you're appealing to epistemology, moral epistemology. We're not talking moral epistemology. We're talking about the existence, the ontology of morality. Why does it exist in the first place, and how can you justify and account for it on a no-God, naturalistic, atheistic framework? How are you not avoiding the fallacy of speciesism, where you're having this bias towards the human race? Why does it matter that human beings flourish? What makes that good other than we don't like it? Because at that point, it just sounds relativistic.
Great and fair question. And to your comment before that, saying that I don't have something to ontologically ground it in, I don't see any difference from that, just because morality might be complicated. I don't see any difference from that one from saying, how did we get here? I can explain how we got here because of God, but you can't because you're an atheist. Neither of us can. You just have a claim. But to your second question, is it just?
Well, I think it's more than a claim. It's within the worldview. It's. I have a response with the whole cumulative case of. I would say that any and everything that exists owes its existence to God in some way or another. But go ahead. I'll let you answer the question.
Sure. But is it minor speciesism? I do have that as a bias, for sure. If I see a punch of human in the face and I see a punch of camel in the face, the first one bothers me a little bit more. But if you look at the world in terms of levels of consciousness and levels of suffering, the moment that we can scientifically prove that an ant feels pain, you will immediately feel bad for squishing an ant. You just will, because you'll be aware
feelings.
that it can feel pain.
But now you're saying to ground this in feelings.
That's time right there. All right, Robert, you're up for your 10-minute cross-examination of Eric.
Bring
Absolutely. In fact, big old jug. I wouldn't mind following that up, even if we'll give you a little bit of my question time, and I'll answer, and you're welcome to respond to it. But not just feelings. It's not a basic belief. Subjective morality might be a basic belief in some ways, but it encompasses lots of stuff. Rationalism, reasoning, and that would be my next question to you about reasoning, but you're more than welcome to respond to my response if you need to, but I'm eager to ask you this question.
Well, I mean, no, it just seems like you're still not giving me a grounding. You're just saying, well, people don't like it, well, it's against human flourishing, but you haven't given an account as to why these things are objectively good or bad. They just seem to be preferences.
Right. I don't have a grounding in the way that you mean, because that's that's something that applies to believing in everything comes from a God. So
it would lead to that, but I mean, it's no
right,
fault of that.
conveniently.
Well,
Conveniently, it would lead
but
to
again,
that. If I asked you what is
but it's like,
the grounding
but
in
hold
all
on.
of existence,
But it's like saying that my wife is attracted to a certain guy that has a certain type of beard with, some muscles and maybe a little bit darker skin tone. That's convenient to the fact that I'm her husband, but it doesn't make it any less true. So you can't fault the position for being conveniently true if it's in fact true. That's quite an odd objection to make.
I think it's intentionally convenient, but I'll save that one. So, okay.
Sure.
As far as rationality, I think we're in an equal dilemma here. Just as you were asking, so what is morals just based on feelings? Obviously, I don't think it's just based on feelings. Like I might take my son to the dentist. I might feel bad about it. I hear him going, as the drill's going in. So clearly, we're both aware that it's not just based on feelings. There is reasoning involved. It's complicated. It's not just from like one source. It's not grounded in God, in my opinion. So I would ask you, do you use reason to conclude that God is a good moral source?
Sure.
So wouldn't we say that we have at least some similarity there, that we're both claiming morality requires our own independent, subjective form of reasoning to some degree?
Yeah, but that was actually part of my case, that morality is a rational enterprise, and thus would need to be grounded in a rational source.
Okay, so then some part of your understanding of moral objectivity is subjective to some degree. Would that be fair?
No. Mm-mm.
But you require your own reason to attain it.
If by mean I as a conscious subject need to apprehend it, sure, but that doesn't make something subjective. I subjectively know, meaning I as a subject know that the number 2 is even, but that doesn't make the fact that the number 2 is even, doesn't make it subjective, just because I perceive it as a subjective subject.
No. Yeah, 100%. I am not claiming that because you use reasoning to obtain objective morality, that then your objective morality is subjective. I'm just saying you have to decide.
To know objective morality.
Right, or maybe know's a strong word. I don't know if we both want to take that burden on, but at least to discover it. Is that fair?
Okay, yeah.
To perceive it.
To some extent,
so in that sense, yeah. So in that sense, you have to rely on yourself to some degree to determine God is good. Yes or no?
Not really sure what you mean by that, but I guess it kind of echoes the question you already asked. I mean, can I reason to the fact that God is the source? Then sure, that was my entire opening case.
Yeah. So you could be wrong.
About what?
Correct?
About
needing God for morality. You could be wrong about all of that.
Well,
it's based on your own reasoning.
My deductive,
if you made a logical flaw,
could my reason be flawed? Sure, but if we follow the logic as I did on my opening case, and given the features of morality, and given that this tells us what kind of source is needed, then whatever grounding you're going to get for this source, which is going to have to be transcendent, necessary, personal, eternal, then whatever you call that is going to be God.
Sure. So I would conclude then that we both have a similar issue here. While you're saying, I know I got it nailed down, hit the nail on the head. I solved it because I've got this God to reference, right? And this God's perfect and he knows everything. And he's the one I look to. We're both still looking to something for our morality, and we're using our own reasoning to get there. So I don't think that appealing to maximally great being helps your case, because you still have to decide he's the one that's good.
Well, again, given the features of the grounding for this source, that description fits God. So it's not as if I'm saying, oh, we need God, let me try and figure out how to explain this, but rather, given that these are these features, this is exactly what describes God.
Right. I don't think you're being dishonest about it. Or saying like, I gotta get a God, so here's what we're doing. I just think that we're both on equal playing field in that regard. Your appeal to something divine doesn't help your argument in any way, because you still decided that God exists and that he's moral, and I didn't.
Given that, I would say that we sure. Well, I would just say I'd be curious because you say we're on equal playing fields. I don't think so, because I don't see how a naturalistic framework can account for something eternal, necessary, transcendent, and personal.
Yes, let's get to that. And I saw that. I wanted to ask why it has to be personal. I also heard other terms like universally binding, supremely authoritative, and then that one that you brought up again, transcendent. And all of those give me a little bit of uncomfortability. Let's go with that first one.
God.
Why? That's why does he have to be personal?
Because I explained this in my opening, but I don't mind reiterating. So the source would have to be personal because these properties. Yes.
I was saying, do me the favor of reiterating. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Properties of justice, kindness, those kind of virtues, these are properties of persons, not things. So whatever grounds this would be something personal. Moreover, the obligation, the moral duty, is something that is owed to a person, not to a thing. I don't have obligations to the laws of mathematics or to the laws of gravity. I have an obligation to fulfill let's say, the speeding law, but that's because that was given by a person. So the moral duty arises from commands given, from obligations given, and the properties of morality are properties of persons, not things.
I don't feel it's obligatory. So when you say I have an obligation to it, it's not obligatory. There's consequences for our behavior, and those consequences might affect others, or they might affect us. But either way, the way I would understand morality is that what you decide to do, you are aware of those consequences. And when we're not aware of them, perhaps in some utilitarian sense, it still mattered. I don't go 100% down that road, but I get the logic of it. But there are consequences to what you're doing. I don't feel an obligation. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like that, I think that's a place where I'm a little more Lincoln Douglas than Oxford, so maybe I'm ruining the format of the whole thing. But I just want to talk to you about it. I don't understand why you would say it's obligatory, and even with your reiterating your point on it being personal, it just falls short, man. It does not make sense to me. It's personal in the same way that what I do with another person is in between us. That's personal. And if I act immorally or unethically to them, I have personally affected them. Yeah, but that doesn't make me think that the moral lawgiver needs to be personal, or even that we need a moral lawgiver. You know what I mean?
No. But it seems like so far you're just saying you don't get it, or it just seems off to you. But that's not really an objection. I don't know if you're trying to get to one.
No, I wasn't trying to get to an objection. I'm trying to understand your point. I want to steel man you. I want to get where you're coming from.
I hope so, because that opening was a little rough.
Mine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So,
like saying I don't want to give up a fear in an afterlife or something like that.
All right, guys. We're now concluded that portion of the cross. Now it's 20. Y'all been doing it anyway, sort of an open discussion anyway. So you guys continue with the open discussion for 20 minutes more, man. You got that last 20 minutes. You guys got it.
We do that. We've had so many conversations. I think at this point we don't know a way to do this without just talking it out. But
hey, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
Can I ask you something? And this might be a little unrelated to the topic. But do you believe in evolution? I don't know that we've ever discussed that.
No, no, I don't. No.
So my whole opening with the evolution thing, you're just like, no, that's all nonsense.
I didn't think it
come
answered the
from
question. I didn't think it answered the question, even if you appeal to evolution.
Okay, but because it kind of explains where it all came from, and we didn't need God for that, right? That was my whole.
Which is what I replied to earlier. At best, it would show you how we came to know, but it wouldn't show you why it exists. Mm-hmm. I could explain how we came. Right. I mean that still wouldn't answer the question. On there, you're just pulling some more epistemology, not theology.
I don't know why anything exists, Eric. You know that. You claim to know why, but that's just theology, man. That's not philosophy. That's boring.
That's not a rebuttal or objection. That's just saying you don't like it. That's not my problem if you don't like it. There's a lot of things that are true I don't like. Doesn't make them less true.
It doesn't make them helpful to understanding morality or ethics either.
So, you're appealing to understanding. We're not talking about understanding, just the existence. I'm curious so in my second argument with the existence from evil, that evil can only exist if you have teleology to life, if you have final causes. How are there any final causes on your view?
Explain further.
So obviously you would agree. On your view, you would agree that we're not evolving for the sake of something. We're not evolving to reach some goal or purpose, correct? Right. So a child being born with a disease, would you call that evil?
Depending on how you mean evil, I don't think evil really exists. I mean, you let somebody like torture another person and go, if that's not evil, what is evil? You know,
hold on.
But
you don't
evil like in the way you mean it.
You don't believe evil, so you believe in objective morality, but you don't believe in evil.
Correct. Once again, I don't want to get lost in semantics, but I don't believe evil exists in the same way I don't think sin exists. Is it evil for a tornado to take out a town or a child to be born with a deformity? And in the sense of whenever we look at Isaiah and God says, I created evil, I would say in that sense of evil, I don't think it exists, but your Bible would say it does, and that it actually comes from God.
No, that there's better translations that God it creates calamities. But I'm glad that you brought up the tornado thing. So I would argue that if there's no God, then the best you can do is moral nihilism, or at best relativism, where everything is not immoral or moral, but amoral. A tornado, like you said, there's nothing immoral, so to speak, naturally about wind going really fast and picking up houses and killing people any more than a rock falling on someone is immoral. But I would say that if there's no God and we're just physical machines, and as you would say, we don't have free will, then if we don't blame tornadoes and rocks and hold them morally accountable, I don't see how we can hold people morally accountable.
Because people have more capacity than rocks.
Yeah, but that doesn't. It's special pleading. Then I go back to the alien analogy. Let's say that this alien race had more capacities than us. Well, sure it is.
If an alien race has more ethical capacity than we do, then they would likely be capable of suffering more or making better moral decisions. And the same way that a lion eating an antelope isn't murder. But if it did have our moral understanding, then it would enter into this whole new level of consciousness where morals would be significant to it. That's the only reason we're talking about this, is because we have the capability of doing so. So it's that old analogy of you walk out and see a hole in the cement and it's filled with water after a rain, and you say, look, this beautiful amount of water, this beautiful space of water has magically filled this hole. And I look at it and say, well, it's that shape because of the hole. We have morals because of our development. Now, there is a truth that exists about something being right or wrong.
Can I interject?
And we're trying to attain that. Absolutely. I'll keep going if you don't stop me.
We have our morals because of our development. Or are you said something like we have morality?
We are understanding it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that means it
on a
existed
level.
prior to our understanding.
A form of morality certainly existed prior to our understanding of it. A form of objective
Okay.
morality, yes.
Okay, right. And how did this thing exist without our understanding?
Where did everything come from? You keep falling back on this. If that's the crux
Well, you
of
act
your
like
argument, Eric,
you act like it's a
it is. It is. It's nuts.
It is the central
nuts.
question. You not liking the
If
question
the-
isn't an objection.
No, it's not that I don't like it. It is
It's a
ridiculous
dodge.
to discuss. It is not a dodge. It is ridiculous to say in any topic we want to discuss. What's another one? Aesthetics? Okay, another philosophical branch, right? Why is Picasso's work appealing to us as opposed to my painting? Right? My painting sucks. How do we know what's good or bad? And I'm not getting off track. Bear with me. I see you making the face.
Right, yeah.
Stay with me for 1 second. Okay, but
I'm following you.
In the same sense, if we are going to have a debate on what is aesthetics, why is the bird chirping appealing to my ear, right? We can have a philosophical discussion about that. Or why do I love looking at a horizon over the ocean? We can talk about this philosophically. But if you say, hold on, before we do that, where did the sound come from? Where did art come from? Where did aesthetics come from? Why are we here? I mean, come on. That's not what philosophy has been doing for thousands of years while we're working toward trying to answer ethics and no, we're not, that's a branch of it, but we're not ignoring all these other areas because we can't answer one question. That would be insane. That's not what ethics is doing.
But I'm not saying we can't answer a question. In fact, I'm the one providing answers.
No, you're
saying you don't like
asserting.
it.
Yeah, you're asserting
and,
it. And you're saying,
well,
it all comes from God. God made it.
That was my opening.
Eric, I know you have arguments for it. I'm saying we can discuss
so far, it just
morals and ethics without just stopping altogether and going, well, where did it come from? I got an answer for that. You could do that with literally anything. That's my point. But it doesn't. It doesn't progress the conversation.
No. So you're still. I still think you're confusing the two categories of epistemology and ontology. And you brought up aesthetics. There's an argument from beauty. You brought up qualities like sound and secondary qualities. There's an argument from that too. Nevertheless, but again, I mean, you say it flippantly as if it's not a big deal. I mean, the whole point of this debate is to answer that question, and yet when I bring up that question, you kind of just say that you don't like it, or say, "Oh, why do we have to go there?" I mean, that is literally the thing that we're trying to answer here.
You are reducing something that is extremely complicated, like ethics, down to simply saying, "Did God make it or not? Where did it come from?"
Yeah, so
I don't know where all this came from.
There's some loaded baggage there. You're saying that I'm reducing it to simply saying, again, it's just a hand-waving dismissal. That's not a response to my argument. I was hoping to hear a substantial.
We can do morals without inserting God. Yes or no?
Yes, we can have moral knowledge, epistemology, without asserting God. Sure.
Right, and we can move ahead and become more moral without inserting.
But yeah, see, but that's the thing, though. But I'm going to sound like a precept here. It's not a precept argument, though. But by what standard we can be more moral? To what? That is appealing to teleology. You're appealing to a final cause. But we've already established if there's no God, there are no final causes. There is no teleology to life in the world. So what are we moving towards? What goal? What standard are we approaching?
Human flourishing.
And why is that good? Why is that good? Let me reverse it and say what.
That's what morality is.
Let me reverse and say this is what you've been doing to me. Saying, oh wow, you're just saying all you're doing is saying, well, what is it? Well, it's just human flourishing. That doesn't further the conversation. You're just simply reducing it to that. I mean, I could do the same thing, but nevertheless, so why? Let me ask it this way: why is human flourishing objectively morally good?
That is what morality is engaging with. We're trying to discover that which is right and wrong in our behaviors.
Why is it good?
If that's the topic. In the same sense of
human flourishing.
In the same way, if I said, let's work toward, well, not simply human flourishing, it's more than that as well. It's also avoiding unnecessary suffering.
And why is that? But
there's many things that are, because that's what morality is. If you're
So-
trying to find a definition deeper than the definition, then we're not going to be able to get anywhere
Who
because
says
your
that's the
deeper.
definition?
Hold on. Your deeper source that you're looking for can only be found in the supernatural. Can only be found in
Praise
some kind of divine
God.
place.
Preach it, brother.
Right. That's my whole point. So if that is your argument, if you say, look, the way I define morality is that which comes from God, then you're making a circular argument when you say morals need God.
So I didn't know that's not how I define morality. But what you're essentially saying is human flourishing is
define it for me.
human flourishing is good, so we should do good because it's good.
Because it's moral. And that's what morality is. If I asked you, what is your grounding in health? What is your
The way in which it was
grounding
designed
in
to function and flourish, which appeals to teleology.
You go back to design?
That what else is there? Teleology. How do you know if your phone is working or not? Because there is a way in which it ought to function and flourish, which appeals to a design plan, which appeals to
cannot just be limited to, okay, God made it, and therefore we go to God for the truth. Even if
can you give me a rebuttal to what I'm saying instead of complaining about it?
It's nonsense. You're not even discussing whether or not health is going to be successful, whether you take this path or not. That's how we discover it. That's how we understand it.
Nonsense. So we'll make something unhealthy.
Absolutely.
What makes something unhealthy?
Whether or not it helps your body, I don't know, medically, biologically. It's biologically beneficial.
In what way?
I don't know. Why do you need more than that?
Well, because why are you asking why do you need more than that? Because it seems like if I push for more than that, you're going to have to eventually appeal to some type of teleology.
Oh. No, I don't think I will. And that's, Eric, that's the crux of my opening argument, is the objection to you saying we have to have something on a cosmological level. Like, I'll give you an analogy. If I buy a car, and then that car is something that my wife and I use to get back and forth from work, in the struggles of an early marriage, right? I'd pick her up or she'd pick me up, or we have memories of going to the lake together in the car. And then that car eventually is older. And I let my daughter use the car. She's coming up on 16, and she uses it during her early college days and her late high school days, what have you. Eventually that car gets junked out. It gets rusted up. It's useless. It's sold for parts. It's melted down, what have you. It's thrown into a landfill. It still had value, but it didn't have value on this plane that you're referencing. It didn't have value in some sense of, where did it all come from? Where did we all come from? Where's it going to be in the end of all the universe? On the God level, it didn't really have value there because that level isn't necessary, and that level has no value to how we care about things. You know what I mean? And that's the same sense of morals don't need your extra added, exponent to the number. We can do it without God.
So you're just talking about, so far it just sounds like you're talking about preferences and imposing a value on something as opposed to intrinsic value. If there are things that are intrinsically valuable, intrinsically right or wrong, then yeah, you need something more than just preference. But I want to jump here. So
you just used the word intrinsic as a replacement for the thing that you've been saying this whole time. Once again, and like everything you are using is just like, it's another slip in for your God concept. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't how we this isn't how we do philosophy. This is how we do apologetics.
No, this is exactly how we do philosophy. You're just selling
God.
If you look,
no, Eric,
if you
it's
look
marketing.
it's marketing. If you look at the features of something, you look at the state of something and its properties. By knowing the state and properties of a thing, it will allude you to what it's grounded in. So, for example, conscious subjects are going to be grounded in conscious beings that are substances which can possess these states and properties of the mind. So knowing the states and properties of something allude you to the fact that it is grounded in something that is going to possess these things. So no, this is not just me slipping something in. It's not my fault that the properties of objective morality require necessarily some type of transcendent, eternal, necessary personal being. The fact that you don't like that is not a rebuttal.
It's not me saying I don't like it. I'm having a discussion with you. But okay, what is what are numbers grounded in the same way?
Yeah, so this goes into some type of Platonism, but I would just reiterate the statement I said earlier. Any and everything that exists owes its existence to God in one way or another.
Boom!
If numbers do exist,
That's exactly what. Eric,
so again, you're just telling me you don't like it.
You of.
Yes.
No, I'm saying that's not how we do it. All you're doing with each argument, with each point, you go, well, God, that has nothing to do with numbers. That doesn't help explain. It has no explanatory power. And even if it is God, we still have to decide whether or not we're going to accept God's morals. It doesn't get us any farther to say, look, it came from God. In fact, let's do that. We'll do that. Okay. God said it. What's something from a divine command perspective that we could say God said this and therefore that's the way it is? Any example?
Well, I still think
don't
you're doing
boil
the epistemology,
a calf
ontology
in the
thing.
mother's milk.
Right, yeah. So again, epistemology, ontology thing. We can come to know morality without commands from God, but there are things that if God commands, it would become moral or immoral. But that's not my argument. My argument is not that we read the Bible and say, oh, must be that murder is wrong. In fact, even the Bible itself says that the moral law is written on our hearts. So I don't think you need to believe in God to know whether or not something is right or wrong. So that's not my argument. It seems to be that's where you're going, which I've kept saying.
That's not my argument either. I'm saying at no point do we need to insert God.
For what?
Your whole claim that
but wait, insert God for what? Insert God. I'm not saying morals
to be able
come
to understand
from God.
morality.
I'm saying, and I'm not saying that either. I'm saying without God, there would be no objective morality. Not that we can't know it, not that we can't talk about it, not that we can't philosophize over it. That if there's no God, there's no objective, transcendent, binding morality in which we are obligated to do. There's no intrinsic value. There's no objective purpose or meaning. There's no teleology. All these things I explained in my opening.
You keep pausing. And like each time you pause, I'm like,
sorry.
Can you? No, sorry. It's how you talk. You're a preacher. Let's preacher talk. I dig it. Okay, so can you define morality for me?
Yeah, I would probably agree with the same definition you'd give. I'm fine with that.
Humor me. What would it be? Because my definition included human flourishing, lowering, suffering, that sort of thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But you seem to object to my definition. You seem to find my definition a bit vacuous.
No, what I'm saying is that on your view, why would these things be good? And I'm saying you can't account for that on your view. That's what I'm objecting to.
Why would they be good on yours?
Because there was a way in which we were made to function and flourish. There was proper functioning. There was ought. There was intrinsic value. There are things that are objectively transcendent and binding to us universally. They are prescriptive. So at best, science and evolution can tell you what is, but you cannot get an ought from an is. You're familiar with Hume. Saying how something is doesn't tell you how something ought to be. And if there is no God, there can be no oughts because that appeals to teleology.
Why would it be important that it comes from God then? Wouldn't you still have to determine whether or not you accept his morals?
So again, I'm not saying it, quote, comes from God. I'm saying without God, there would be no intrinsic, everything else that I've described. There would be no teleology, no purpose. We're not, if you're saying we're progressing towards something in our morality, what are we progressing towards? There's no goal or standard. It's like saying this rock, this rock is being shaped by the river, and it's being shaped towards a better rock. What does that even mean? If there's no God, there are no final causes in that way, and that's what I'm saying you can account for. One of the many things you can account for. And if you just say again, but adding God doesn't do anything, it's not going to be a rebuttal.
But we both can accept that morals exist, right? And we both can see that things are improving, and we both can recognize that is occurring.
Improving by what standard are we? Is it improving?
I don't know, communally, but you can just look at the world and recognize that we have, due to technology, improved our healthcare. We've improved our laws. Democracy is spread around.
You're giving me examples of what can be improved, but I'm still asking improving towards what
those
standard?
Are things that have improved.
According to what?
When you say what standard, you're talking about a standard that is once again in your special little place, right? That special little place with all these words. Each time you use these words,
give me a standard.
The one that you agreed to, a combination of human flourishing and limiting unnecessary suffering.
No, those aren't the standards. Those are the examples. Those are examples that allude to a standard. Those aren't the standard.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. You said that you accept that as a definition of morality.
Yes, but there still needs to be a standard. If I were judging who can paint the best, if I were judging who can paint or draw the best Marlon Wilson, then we can use examples that are progressing to better pictures of Marlon, but those aren't the standard. Marlon is the standard. So we use Marlon as a standard to judge which of these pictures are progressively getting better to look more like Marlon.
Eric, that's because in your question, you presented the standard. So if you say,
which shows there needs to be a standard.
Who can draw
that's the point.
No, because in your question, you put it in the question. Who can draw the best picture of Marlon, referencing Marlon as the standard to which they would draw the picture, right? Mm-hmm. And then you want to apply that to something
to judge things.
That you have no evidence of a standard, but then you use the fact that this exists, and you say, "I need this standard for this to exist," and then you use that to defend the fact that something exists. For example,
no, I did the opposite.
If we didn't, it's different than Marlon. If you said, who can draw the best image of Jesus Christ, that would be analogous to your God argument. What is the standard for that? I don't know. We're trying to attain it, right? So you can go and research, look through all the anthropological evidence that you have. You can read the Bible. You might be able to find. Go ahead.
Can I skip to something just because I see Marlon? I don't know how much time we have.
We're actually concluding. I was going to let you guys finish up the last bit of that, and that does conclude the cross-examination of this discussion.
That was quick.
Okay.
It go by fast, man. When you're in the heat of battle, man, it zooms by, man. It really does. All right, so now we're going to go to closing statements. Once again, these are 5-minute closings. This will be followed up by Q&A. So once again, audience, get your questions in if you have yet to do so. With that said, Eric, you're up for your 5-minute closing.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I'll use the whole 5 minutes, but I still didn't hear a response to how you can ground objective morality. I heard examples of things you would consider moral or immoral, but again, you're going to have to judge it by some standard. One thing I didn't get to that I would have loved to was the moral accountability. If there's no free will and no God, then how can we hold people morally accountable? Robert rejects free will, and I don't see how you could have rationality or knowledge. Again, the key features of objective morality show us what is going to be needed for the grounding of morality, and the grounding of morality is exactly what describes God. The fact that it fits and it describes, and that's what we logically deduce and go to, for some reason he felt was, I don't know, I don't mean to mischaracterize, but I think it can be simplified by saying that he just didn't like the answer. If I add 2 and 2 and it equals 4, it doesn't matter if I don't like the number 4. If 2 plus 2 leads to 4, then that's what I have to take, whether I like it or not. I really, like I said, I don't think I used all 5 minutes just to say I still haven't heard a case for how objective morality can be grounded in a We're not talking about moral knowledge, how we come to know morality. We're talking about why does it exist in the first place, or how can it exist? This is moral ontology. Appealing to evolution at best can show why you believe rape is wrong, but it doesn't make rape wrong itself. That's what we're looking for, is what makes it wrong. If you appeal to something like, well, it harms people, well, then you're just saying that this is wrong because it's wrong. But again, what makes it wrong? You're going to have to allude to some type of teleological framework, which cannot exist if there's no God. If there's no God, we're not evolving towards something. We're not evolving for the sake of something. So we cannot be progressing, because progression insinuates that there is an aim or goal or standard to which we are progressing towards. But if there's no God, all you have is efficient causes, no final causes, no teleology. And again, with the key features of objective morality, there is no way to ground these things in anything, because again, it's going to have to be transcendent, personal, eternal, and necessary. You're not going to get any of these things on a naturalistic framework. So again, appealing to anything like evolution, even if I were to grant evolution, it does not get you to where you want it to be. Going back to the alien illustration, if they were to rob us and take us over, I mean, at best you could say, hey, we don't like that, but they can easily say, well, that's how you evolved in your morality. It's not how we evolved our morality. I haven't heard any responses or objections. I've heard a lot of, but that doesn't progress the conversation, but that's just saying God, but that's just convenient. Yeah, that's not a rebuttal. I'll concede the rest of my time, leave room for more questions.
All right.
Love you, Robert.
Thank you, Eric, for the closing statements. Robert, you're up for your 5-minute closing.
Eric's got an ugly shirt. Boom. All right, I'll be serious. Okay, so my biggest objection to Eric's argument, and initially I really thought he was going to do a lot more divine command theory stuff, defending the soul. That would have been fun to get into. I agree with you, Eric. This conversation inevitably should have gone free will. I think we got lost in semantics there. I would encourage the listener to ask some free will questions. I think that's a reasonable place for us to go. My biggest objection to the cross-examine part of the discussion is I see Eric as initially agreeing with my definition of morality and agreeing that we don't need God to understand that morality, and yet inserting an unnecessary extra plane, a special plane. It's special because that's where God gets to live on, because God's complicated and mysterious. And this is on a cosmic level. This exists for all time. This has grounding, a special word that we wouldn't apply to other things, but we would apply it to morality. We would apply it to where everything comes from. We need God to explain all of existence and how it originated. Everything conveniently that Eric wants to engage with is defending God. And that's why my criticism of Eric's whole argument is this is apologetics. It's not philosophy. It doesn't belong next to all of the philosophers that preceded it. It's offensive in the sense that he thinks that it is equal to, when really all it does is limit the entire conversation to, yeah, but my God exists. And it's not good enough for him to have his eternal life, to have his special soul paradise, to have his final reality, and being able to explain everything in a simple way. He needs me to do it as well. He needs you all to believe it as well. And that's my objection to apologetics, is they present things. I'm not saying Eric's a dishonest dude. I like Eric, but he's part of a system that presents things as if they want to discuss the logic of it, the philosophy behind it. I'll reference Kant and I'll reference Rawls and I'll reference Aristotle, but they're not doing what those men did. Those men worked for what they achieved, and we have based our civilization on them. What they're doing is what has held our civilization back. And I don't want to put up with it anymore. I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate them coming in to my children's schools trying to teach creationism. I don't appreciate them trying to control our legislatures, to take rights away from other people based on their backwards beliefs. That's the biggest problem of this, is they come in like a Trojan horse. You think, okay, let's have this debate, let's have this conversation, but then what you get is more apologetics. And guys, that's simple marketing. We all know the defense that you put on yourself when you get to a used car lot and that guy comes around and he's got the tie on and Eric's shirt or what have you, and he comes up and he's like, hey, this one's a good one. And you already get on defense, right? We need to start doing that with these guys. We need to start asking, are you just going to do apologetics? Are you a believer? Because if you're not a skeptic, I need to approach you with some skepticism. Because what you call a discussion on morality might just be another way for you to smuggle in your God in that Trojan horse. I think we can do better than that. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you both for your closing remarks. Appreciate you both. All right, so now we're going to jump into some Q&A, man. You guys got some questions out there, and there's some solid questions, so we go tackle these guys real quick. And I got to take care of my super chats. I appreciate you for the super chats. Pop up on the bottom of the screen there. This is from Jungle Jargon. Thank you for the super chat, Jungle. All right, this is for, doesn't say who it's for, but let's read it to find out. Why is morality eventually absent apart from God? Every ancient civilization without God lacked morality. I guess Eric.
I think that might be a question from, for Robert.
Yeah, Robert.
I think so.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Go ahead, Robert.
So. Every ancient civilization without God lacked morality. I would assume that Mr. Jungle Jargon is going to say that morality is defined by our current system of ethics. And it has to meet all of these certain standards that are in place in order for it to be moral. But I don't see morality that way. And I think Jungle Jargon might not also, if we considered that you might have 9 things that are moral instead of all 10, you're still a pretty good person. And we could look at past civilizations and see where they've done better than us in certain ways. Native Americans seem to be a little kinder to animals than their colonial people that came thereafter. But though lack the Western civilization concepts of morality that we have today. So I don't know. I don't know that they lacked morality. You could say that past civilizations were less moral to some degree. That would be a fair criticism.
All right. Eric, any thoughts?
No, I don't know if I'd say they lacked morality. Maybe they were lacking in some moral principles, but I think the moral law is written on all our hearts.
All right. All right, just to give you guys a heads up for the Q&A, it's 1 minute each, so 1 minute to respond to the initial question, and then the other person has 1 minute to respond as well. All right, so I have another super chat here, and this is coming from Jake. All right, why would it be anything less than personal? I think this is for you, Robert.
Yeah, I think that's presupposing a he. And the same, I'll try to keep it under a minute, Marlon. I'll do my best. But in the same way, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Nietzsche later came along and said, you're presupposing the I. When you ask the question, why would he be anything less than personal, presupposing the he, I guess if there was a he, then he likely would be personal. I don't know.
All right. Eric, any thoughts?
No.
All right.
Somebody throw Eric a question. Where's my atheist homies at?
Yeah, all these super chats. I think we actually have one here, actually. I think this may be for you, Eric. If my morals disagree with God's morals, then doesn't that mean God is not necessary for my morality? It's for you, Eric.
No, it means that you're wrong. That's what it would. No, I mean that's like saying if my answer to the math question disagreed with mathematics, doesn't it mean that I don't need math? No, it means you're wrong.
All right. Any comment on that, Robert?
Yes. Oh my God. How do you know? Referencing God. How do you know that answer for math is correct? Because you're claiming that God is true. You know, like unnecessarily. You where's the evidence for that? You know what I mean? When he says if my morals object with, all right, I wasn't listening. So that's a joke. That's a joke.
All right, guys. I have another question here. Another super chat for you, Robert. What's your position on abortion, Robert?
Oh, I don't like it. But I certainly don't want to deny someone's rights from being able to choose to do it. So if my wife wants to have an abortion, I would kind of lean to her best decision on it. But, you know, at the point that it can fit into a spoon, I don't care. Science doesn't seem to care either. Modern medical science doesn't seem to focus on that being something that we would consider to be personhood, despite the fact that it's alive. But at the third trimester, you know, it becomes a little bit more of a personal thing, just from my take on it. I think where the law sits right now, that it rejects abortion very late in the third trimester and calls that illegal, I think that's a safe place to be. So a lot of what people are objecting to isn't even legal anyway. It's certainly not what Trump was talking about with post-birth abortion bull BS. Out of respect to your show, Marlon. Almost cussed. But anyway, yeah, that would be my take. Because I don't like it, but I'm not going to deny someone's rights for it.
Why don't you like it?
It's icky.
What makes it icky?
Because you think about what that little zygote or gamete might become, and that has some emotional appeal for sure. Something that I can totally relate with theists on that level, or evangelicals, or what have you. You know, pro-life people. I totally understand where they're coming from in that sense, but ultimately, what's best for society, what's best for the mother, what's best for honoring her rights. What's best for the child is significant as that child progresses further through the pregnancy. Once the child is born, I would say they deserve every right that we could apply to them. But
how does 7 inches make it unapplicable?
Well, it has to do passage. With at what point is that child able to experience suffering? At what point is that child able to
matter?
be conscious? Well,
there are children.
If you recall, for the last hour and 40 minutes, we both would say that matters a lot.
Well, it's rare, but there are cases where children are born that can't feel pain their entire life. So, according to what you just said, as long as they can't suffer, then we can kill them even after they're born.
It would be less of a immoral act to light a lighter underneath the finger of someone that can't feel pain than to light a lighter under the finger of someone that can. But both would be bad. But what you're trying to do is say, just because of if it doesn't have every bit of the data, kind of like that first question from whatever his name was, Hungry Hippo or something. But if it doesn't have all of it, then it can't have any of it. And that's just not how we people.
That was your criteria, not mine. I think science is clear that it's life from conception.
I'm not disagreeing with life. Your sperm's alive.
Yeah, but it's human life. all the criteria, not just alive, it's human life, human DNA, and there's no controversy that at conception you have a human person.
Your sperm is human life.
There's no controversy that at conception you have a human person.
Yes, there is.
All right.
We don't grant.
Let's just we can go ahead and progress to the next question. And it's a super chat, and it sort of keeps going on the same subject we're talking about with abortion. Is your wife's choice more important than a life, Robert?
Well, once again, what do you mean by life? But is my wife's choice more important than the baby's life, than a baby's existence? Of course not. No. But at what point do we grant personhood? It's a little more complicated than something that you could put on a bumper sticker. But I think a lot of people that look at the images on billboards that you drive by on the highway of like a hand cut off or like a cute little baby. It's like, this baby has a heartbeat at 2 days after conception or something. You can trust that that's all propaganda. We actually have laws in place to prevent the stuff that you would really object to. The stuff that most abortions the times that most abortions are occurring are when the baby could fit on a teaspoon. And I don't know that we really have personal emotional objections to that. You might have religious objections to it, but that's your problem. That's your religion. You don't get to enforce that on others.
All right, Eric, any thoughts?
It's not enforcing religion, it's enforcing morality. Abortion, as my great friend Dr. Braxton Hunter said, abortion is not a political issue, it's a moral issue that has been politicized. And when you're talking about there are laws, but a lot of these laws have really funny loopholes. Like there's a law that, you can't have an abortion up to this time unless the mother's health is at stake, and that can include emotional health, and that can mean anything from like, I don't want a baby, or I think this is going to bother me in the future. That would be the BS in this conversation here, that saying that there are laws that actually protect that. There's a lot of loopholes. And no, I mean, when the baby, and it is a baby, human person, even that it can fit on a teaspoon, a lot of times women don't even know they're pregnant until weeks into their pregnancy, and that's when the abortions happen. So, there's just a lot of disagreement there.
I worry that you got... Do I need to stop there, Marlon?
Yeah, I'm trying to get through. I got several more questions. So
That's fair.
Appease the audience, try to get these questions in.
Yes, sir.
All right. This is coming from Twitter. This is a question I was posted earlier. Does Robert Stanley believe morality is objective? Because God is necessary moral lawgiver for morality to be objective? With atheism, morality is subjective and thus meaningless. What are your thoughts on that, Robert?
Let me try a thought experiment real quick, because Eric and Marlon obviously see the flaws in that already, but I'm gonna do this to show it. His name is the Gospel Truth 8. Does the Gospel Truth 8 believe morality is objective? Because God is evidence that morality is subjective, since morality comes from God. With a belief in God, theism, morality is actually subjective and thus meaningless. If I strawman your argument, it's pretty easy to destroy it. And I think that the Gospel Truth 8 might just be strawmanning here. Yes, I do believe morality is objective. I don't think that we need a lawgiver for a law. If I did, I'd be a theist, right? I don't think the the logical laws come from God. I think they exist without God. So it doesn't, I think morality is subjective and objective. It's relative. It's crazy. It's objective in multiple ways. But in the way that you mean, I think you just mean it as by objective, you mean, does it come from God? In that sense, no, it's not objective in my opinion.
All right. Eric, any thoughts?
I just kind of reiterate what I said earlier. If there's no God, I would say then the best thing you got is moral nihilism, where everything is amoral, not immoral or moral, but amoral, Just like a rock falling is not moral or immoral, a rock having 3 points or 5 points is not moral or immoral. If there's no God, it doesn't matter how many hearts we have, how many limbs we evolve with. There is no objective purpose or meaning, goal, or final cause to which we are trying to reach, and everything becomes amoral. It's not moral. So, yeah, I would say if there's no God, then there's no objective meaning and purpose, and you can't have an objective morality. It would all boil down to relativism or just moral nihilism.
All right. And here's another one from Twitter. Actually, that's not the correct picture, but nonetheless, what he described as moral beliefs as preferences. If someone prefers to hurt others, are their reasons for hurting just as valid as his reasons in advocating for a better society? Is his means of evaluating that also an arbitrary preference?
I want to give it the time it deserves to consider it. If you don't mind repeating, would he describe his moral beliefs as preferences? Subjectively, yes. If someone prefers to hurt others, are their reasons for hurting just as valid as his reasons for advocating for a better society? Subjectively, yes. Is his means of evaluating that also an arbitrary preference? I think our subjective morality is fairly arbitrary. So, yes, but not objectively.
All
I'm
right.
sorry if that's confusing, but I tried to answer it to each of the questions.
All right. Eric, any thoughts?
No, we can go on.
All right. Sorry, Robert. These questions are heavy, you man.
No, that's fine.
It's
I'm happy. I like the attention.
All right. And here's another question for you, Robert. Did morality come from nothing in the end?
I don't know. I don't think anything can come from nothing. How could you get something from nothing? That's nonsense to me. My brain just can't do that. Getting something from nothing. It makes no sense. And what is nothing? How could nothing be? So did morality come from nothing? I'm nearly certain it did not. But, and what I think you're implying there, then where the heck did it come from? Man, I don't know.
Eric?
Yeah, then I agree with him. It is nonsense, and that's why I would encourage him to become a Christian theist, because exactly the fact that you can't get something from nothing, then we look if existence is here, then it must have come from something else that did not borrow existence but was necessary. And the same would apply to morality, which is the entire point of this debate and discussion is how does it exist and what is its grounding? If it can't come from nothing, and it has to come from something, and if a property of morality is that that the properties are personal properties such as love, kindness, virtue, etc., then you would have to have an eternal, necessary personal being, namely God. So if Robert wants to ground objective morality, he's going to have to be a theist, and he's going to have to give up atheism.
All right. Here's another question for you, Robert. All right. How does atheism avoid descending into moral non-cognitivism? Cognitivism. Woo. Get that one out.
Is that an adjective on top of a noun, or is that a thing? Do you guys know what moral non-cognitivism is? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, so it's basically saying that moral statements are neither true nor false. So saying something like is wrong is just the same thing as saying I don't like murder. So there's no truth or falsity to a moral statement. Non-cognitivism says that it's just.
Yeah,
it's just describing.
No. I mean, yeah. I believe that there is I think there's lots. Once again, I don't want to beat the dead horse here. I think there's lots of forms of morality. If we're going to break it down, it's complicated.
But he's asking, how does it avoid? How does atheism avoid?
Right, but I believe in objective morality. I think there is a form that exists with or without us. So, I don't understand why a lack of belief in God would mean that we don't have an objective truth about what is best for us, whether we're aware of it or not. Eric, is that fair? Did I mean, not asking if you agree with me. I'm just saying, like, did I answer that question fairly? Because
I don't think so, because he's not asking how does a lack of belief in God avoid it. It's just saying if there is no God, how do you avoid non-cognitivism?
Oh, right. Okay, so that's kind of the same question as what your whole argument is, that if God doesn't
Yeah.
exist, then this level of morality can exist. And I would say, look, what's his name?
Gavin.
I don't know the guy. Gavin. I would respond to Gavin, but simply by saying that Gavin, Eric, Marlon, and Robert all agree with a certain amount of morality that certainly exists. It's just that the three of you take it one step farther than I do. In the same way, if you're God belief, we all, maybe non sequitur, but I think it's convenient that it aligns, because if we're talking about God, we all reject all of the gods. You guys just go one God, or I just go one God further than you do. You guys just go one level of morality more than I do.
All right, Eric, any thoughts?
Nope, not without just reiterating my opening that if there's no God, you can't have objective morality.
Sure.
All right. And another question for you, Robert. If there is a rubric for morality, who is the author of the rubric?
I don't think there is an author. I know that's a disappointing answer, but that's the fairest one I can give.
All right. Eric, any thoughts?
Nope, just same arguments. It applies.
Oh,
right.
but you know what? I can give a better answer if you want, Marlon. We can say that we could hypothesize a reality where everyone is suffering all the time. And then we could look at the reality that we currently exist in, where sometimes we're feeling pleasure, sometimes ennui, sometimes actual literal suffering. And we can say that let's do the first example as 0, and the example that we're offering is 5, and then hypothesize that there may be a 10. And all of a sudden, we have created a conceptual rubric, right? A sliding scale of the best possible world to the worst possible world, and assuming that we're somewhere in the middle. We might be 3, we might be 7, we might be 5, who knows? But at that point, we could say, we just became the author of that rubric. I don't know. I don't know if that's a better answer than the first one, but after I gave it more thought, I wanted to try to improve on it.
All right. Eric, do you have any extra follow-up to his more thorough response to that question?
No.
All right. And this will be the last question for today. Also, in the matters of morality, it's unavoidable we rely on authority. Example given, Aristotle taught we had to find a person with good judgment. On any depth of morality, how do we find such a person? I don't know who want to tackle this one first. What do you
definitely
think?
For Eric.
What do you think, Eric?
No, it would be supporting my arguments that you would have to have some type of source that is personal and authoritative that we can rely on for moral guidance, and that could be the grounding and standard of morality. So I just think this backs up and supports the arguments I gave, namely the key features of objective morality and what kind of grounding would be needed. Then yeah, you would need something like God. Same thing with existence. Earlier, Robert said you can't get something from nothing. Right, so if existence is here, then you have to eventually get past contingently existent things and have a grounding in which there is something necessarily existent, namely God. I would say the same thing applies with morality. You have to get past these contingent moral beings into a necessary moral being that has always existed, and that would be God.
All right. Robert, any thoughts?
Marlon, if you could give me a little bit of leniency being the last question, I kind of want to correct Eric's understanding of the question. And I could be wrong, but I think what Andy is challenging you on here is, and maybe challenging us both, because I could see it going both ways, but it sounds like it's sort of you. In the system of virtue ethics, which I would assume you appeal to, Aristotelian virtue ethics, and saying we must look to Jesus Christ. This might be unrelated to the debate to some degree, but we must look to Jesus Christ or to God. Or to God's essence, or what would you call it? God's nature, all these different things. Looking to those for our answers, since You shouldn't appeal to authority, making a logical fallacy there. Well, I don't want to go that route because maybe the authority is necessary or understandable with respect to having the authority. But since you are unethical yourself, how could you then understand which path to follow? I think is more or less what he's challenging on. How can you know something's good? If you say, I know it's good because I look to this, but if you're saying you're not good, then how can you judge that which is good?
Eric, can you follow up to that? I think you're muted.
Oh, his audio went out.
I think your audio went out, or you muted?
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I say I think the question can be interpreted a number of ways, but if we find a person with good judgment and we rely on authority, then I would, it can almost be posed as an objection or a pushback towards Robert's position, because if he defines morality as like that, human flourishing, well, then what authority do we appeal to know that human flourishing is good? Note, not what is conducive to human flourishing, but what authority can we appeal to let us know that human flourishing is in fact a good thing? And I think that's
All right.
Yeah, I would actually support Eric's point on that, or at least agree with it. And if that was directed to me, Andy, my mistake, I don't agree that there needs to be an authority, would be my response.
All right. Well, guys, another great discussion, man. Thank you guys for joining me, man. It's fun, and I was looking forward to this. I want to see you guys go at it a little bit, man, and you guys did just that, and I appreciate the respect you guys showed to each other and kept it cool, collected, and put some great stuff out there, man. So I do thank you guys. Robert, as always, I give gifts away for those who are first comers on the Gospel Truth.
Oh, cool.
So I'll be contacting you after the show to send you a gift as a token of appreciation from me to you. Taking time away from your family and everything to come on the show. Eric, I believe you have your gift, and so we are good to go, and I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna close this thing out, man. All right, any final words?
Was your gift that shirt?
No, it is not. And I like
good.
I like to keep the gifts a surprise, man, because I do want to see your reaction when you get it, man.
I look forward to my gift then.
And Eric, don't you dare reveal it, man. Don't you say anything, Eric.
It's gonna be a Bible.
I won't. But I will say that, one, I don't think my shirt is ugly. I liked it. I actually picked this. I think it's a nice shirt. And I will say that I appreciate talking to Robert. For the most part, we've always had good discussions, and I'm genuinely praying for him. I think he's pretty close. I think he has the right things needed in his toolkit to come to the reasoning that God exists and the Christian God exists. I just think, and forgive me for borderline psychoanalyzing here, but I just think that there's this resistance to accepting God, because what I heard was mainly just an emotional appeal and avoidance to the conclusion as opposed to arguments or rebuttal. So I say that as a positive thing, that I think he's close enough, and there's just some emotional things he has to work through, but I think he's pretty close, and I'd love to see him in heaven, and I hope I do, and I pray that he does accept and receive Christ, and anyone who's listening would do the same, that if there's no God, there's no objective morality. And if there is objective morality and evil, God exists. And he is the teleological framework by which we live our lives, and we should give our lives to him.
Amen.
Because that is the gospel truth.
That is the gospel truth. That's definitely the gospel truth. There it is, man.
And one more thing. Robert said that you and I disagree on how salvation works. We actually don't. We both agree that salvation is attained through Christ and Christ alone. It's just how we respond to that gift is where we disagree about, but not on how salvation works in the first place. I did want to clarify that.
On whether or not you have the ability to respond, or whether or not the responsibility of that response is on you.
Right, but that's a separate question to how salvation works itself. Salvation through Christ alone, both Marlon and I agree.
Okay.
Would that be fair, Marlon?
That'd be fair.
I oversimplified it.
Certainly fair. All right, guys, I'm gonna close this thing out, man. I appreciate you both, man. And Robert, be on the lookout for a message from me to get your address, man.
Thank you.
Get that gift over to you. All right, guys, you guys take care, and God bless. All right.
Thank you.